Every decision you make may seem like a rational choice, but in reality, we're influenced by thousands of tiny little nudges that influence our behavior, from when you brush your teeth in the morning to how much money you save for retirement. Some of these nudges are out of your control, but others are not. You can make it more likely that you save more money and do smarter things with it by purposefully designing your life to make smarter money decisions. This is the key premise behind the book Nudge, a New York Times bestseller written by Richard Thaler, Nobel Prize winner and professor of economics at University of Chicago, and Cass Sunstein, professor of economics at Harvard. So I want to explain how to design your life to save more money, from high-level principles that you should implement to super tactical strategies that will save you more money on things like your mortgage and insurance. But first, if you have no idea who I am, welcome, my name is Charles. I've spent years designing my life to save as much money as I possibly can, and these days I help other people do the same thing as a savings accountability coach. And I've actually adopted a lot of the principles from this book, both for my life and for my clients. But with all of that out of the way, let's get into it. And the overall idea of the book Nudge is that decisions about how our environment is shaped then influences our behavior. The book starts off with an example of designing a cafeteria. So let's say you have to design a cafeteria. How do you decide where to put what? Do you put the salad bar up front so it's the first thing that people see? Or do you put all of the desserts up front so that that's the first thing people see? Do you put the salad bar and do you put the desserts right next to each other so that people are influenced one way or another? Do you hide the dessert bar to prevent people from being tempted and from eating unhealthily? Or do you hide the salad bar because you think people won't want any of that food and you want to put away everything that you don't think people are interested in? There are so many possible decisions you can make, which all will influence how people interact with the cafeteria when they go into it and when they use it. And the important thing about this example is that there is no neutral option. This is really important. There's no neutral environment. No matter how the environment is designed, it will influence our behavior in one way or another. And depending on what goal you want to achieve, different environment designs might be better or worse. If you want people to eat healthy, then the cafeteria should be designed so it's very easy to select a healthy option. But if you want to maximize profits, then you might choose a very different design for the cafeteria. And whether you're designing an environment for other people or designing your own environment, the same principle applies. How you structure your environment will shape your behavior. So if you want a specific goal, then you should think, what are the nudges that you can give yourself so that you will achieve that goal? How can you change your environment to make that more likely? So for example, let's say that the problem I'm dealing with is not being motivated to save. Then how can you design a nudge to give you more motivation? Well, you can make it a daily practice to journal about how saving more money might change your life or why you want your particular goal. Something you could do is you could write out your goal and you could put it over your laptop screen so that you're always looking, constantly reminded of your goal, and that might increase your motivation because you have this reminder of why you even want to pursue that goal in the first place. These are tiny examples of nudges that you can add to your own environment that might help push you towards a particular outcome. And nudges are particularly important for a couple of reasons. One reason is that humans are not actually very good at long-term planning. Now, this is especially true for long-term risks. You don't feel the impact for many years from now. Humans are very good at making decisions based off of the impact today or tomorrow, or at least within the week. But when we're thinking about something that might only have an impact in literal decades from now, that is much harder for us to think about. So for example, saving for retirement is a great example of something that doesn't have an impact for many, many years. Or actually in the short run, it does have an impact. The impact is you need to spend less money. So you actually deal with a little bit of pain if you don't want to spend less money, and you only feel the gain of that for many years from now. But think about the alternative here. If you don't save for retirement, that is a huge risk that you won't have enough money to retire comfortably. Running out of money is a very bad scenario. But even though that risk is enormous, this is still something that people really struggle to do. So if you're trying to achieve a long-term goal or avoid a very long-term risk, like running out of money in retirement, then you have to design your own nudges to make sure that you do the right thing in the moment. Because on a day-to-day basis, almost all of the nudges that you're going to get will be to spend money instead. Every advertisement you get is a nudge telling you that you should spend your money instead of saving it. And typically what humans will do is they will act on what they're nudged to do in the moment. Nudges can be used for bad. And I've already talked about one example, which is advertisements. A company wants to nudge you so that you take your very hard-earned money and you give it to them. You will see millions and millions of nudges telling you that you should spend your money instead of save it. And at the exact same time, you might also run into nudges which make it more difficult to do what you should do or what you want to do. So for example, a company might make it really hard to cancel your subscription. This is a nudge in that it nudges you into not taking any action because it's more difficult. The authors call this sludge, and it's something they're totally against. So both in the beginning of this book and the end, something the authors repeat is to nudge for good. Nudges go both ways and they're super powerful. So if you are going to nudge, hopefully the nudges of our society and the nudges of the people around us and the nudges that we build for ourselves are good for us. And this premise of nudging for good is actually a really big reason I created my free savings community, the Saver Circle. Pretty much nothing will nudge you more than the people who you're surrounded with every day. And if you surround yourself with a good influence, then you will be nudged for good. If you surround yourself with bad influences, then you'll be nudged for bad. So especially if you're having trouble saving more money and you want to be around more people who will make this normal, other people who are also pursuing their financial goals and trying to control their spending, then I would love for you to join the community. I think it will be really helpful. But now that we've talked about the premise of the book and why nudges are so important, what I want to do now is go into a little more detail in how nudges influence our actual finances, from how you use your credit card to how you save for retirement. Because this is the stuff that you really need to master if you want to design your life to save more money. And I want to start with credit cards because this is probably the most common issue that I see with the people I actually work with. The issue is that credit cards make it really easy to spend your money, and they make it a little harder to be mindful about what you're buying. And that's because the expense, the actual time that you feel the cost of spending your money, is very far delayed from the actual moment that you received something. So every time you buy, you feel the gain of buying something, but you don't feel the loss of your money. You don't feel the loss until maybe 30 days later, or maybe even later than that if you don't pay off your credit card bill. And what this means is that the feedback cycle of buying and spending really is not in sync the way it should be. But what makes this really concerning is that, as this book talks about, more people do not pay off their credit card balance at the end of the month than people who actually do. And even of people who do pay off their credit card balance at the end of the month, which is only about 30% of people, only about half of those people use autopay. So even people who are generally pretty good about paying off their credit card bill, and even people who have enough money to, it's still way too easy for those people to forget one month, not pay their full credit card bill, and be hit with the extremely high interest rate and the extra fees of not paying off a credit card. This is an example where creating your own nudges is super important, because you should always have a reminder to pay off your credit card bill. You should never be missing a payment because this becomes so expensive so fast. But another issue, which I didn't even realize is as bad as it is that most people actually don't take into account the interest rate on their credit cards when deciding which one to pay off. Now, I've got an entire video on how to get out of debt as fast as possible, so I'm not going to go into all of the detail right now. But really, the idea is that first, you want to pay all the minimums on everything, because if you miss the minimum, you usually get hit with very large fees or big penalties. But after you pay the minimums, you always want to pay off the highest interest rate first. It doesn't matter what the balance is larger or smaller than the other loans. You always want to put all of the money you can towards the largest interest rate. What most people actually do is they divide their money based on how large the loan amount is. But if you have one loan, which is $2,000 at 15%, and another loan that's $1,000 at 25%, you should not be splitting your money. You should pay the minimums and then put everything you actually can towards the loan with a 25% interest rate. This is an example of where a nudge actually leads us to the wrong decision, because the nudge in this case is to pay off more money to the larger loan and less money to the smaller loan. But mathematically, you save a lot more money if you put all the money you can towards the highest interest rate. Credit card companies make more money if you don't understand how they work. So this is where it's really important to build your own nudges so that you're not influenced by what the company might want you to do. Another really great example of this is in mortgages. Mortgages used to be really easy to compare. They weren't that different. There were just a few options, and really all you had to do is choose the mortgage with the lowest interest rate, so you were paying the least amount of money for the loan that you were getting. This has really changed as there's more variety in mortgages, and it makes it much more difficult to compare across them and choose the right one for your situation. This is another place where companies add sludge, makes it more difficult to decide on the right decision because there's so much overwhelm. It's easier to make a bad call. And this is where our bias for making a quick decision can really hurt us financially. Something the authors talk about in Nudge is that comparing different options actually makes a huge difference in how much money you save. And they actually had this statistic, which is that people who call more than one broker save on average $1,400 on their mortgage. Giving yourself more options is a super powerful way to make sure that you're getting a good deal. Because if you only talk to one mortgage broker, it's much easier for them to influence your decision and convince you to get something that maybe isn't the best deal in the market. Just comparing across multiple companies can make a huge difference, save you thousands more dollars, because you have that better comparison. And this is also why companies always want to nudge you into making a fast decision. If you go buy a car, they want you to make a decision in the first day because this reduces how likely you are to compare, find a better deal, be level-headed, not make an emotional decision, and buy something that actually makes sense. So urgency is a super powerful nudge that companies use against you so that you spend more money and you spend it faster. But one of the areas where people overspend the most is on insurance. And this is something the authors talk a lot about in this book because they have some pretty strong feelings. But basically what you need to understand about insurance is that on average, insurance will always lose you money. And this makes sense if you think about it, because the industry of insurance would only exist if the companies made more money by charging you for insurance than they had to pay out back to you for providing that insurance. So on average, insurance will lose you money. You will not get more out of insurance than you put into it. So the reason that people pay for insurance is because it reduces risk. For an individual person, they might not be able to afford losing their car or losing their house in a way that a massive insurance corporation can cover that cost. It's almost nothing to them. So the benefit of insurance is that it reduces risk at the cost of a higher price. And given that, it really only makes sense to insure things which you can't afford to lose. It's not worth it to pay a higher price for something if you could deal with it yourself. If it's not an emergency, then if you pay for insurance, you're almost certainly going to pay more money than you get out of that insurance. And even for the things that you do have to insure, it still usually saves you money if you insure as little as possible. Basically, the idea is that you want to reduce your risk to the largest amount of money that you can. But even in the cases where you do need to insure something, like your house, most people cannot afford to lose their homes. Even in that situation, most people would still make more money, or save more money, I should say, by getting the largest deductible possible. Really, you want the largest deductible that you can afford, because for the exact same reasons, the more money you pay into insurance, the more money you are losing. You're probably not going to get much out of it. So you will be better off if you can self-insure as much of that as possible. The largest amount that you can afford to lose is the amount that you should have a deductible for. So there are some really interesting examples in this book about where this comes up and why over-insuring turns into such a big problem. So again, highly recommend you actually get some of the details out of this. But the general premise of having the largest deductible you can, or not even having insurance on things that you can afford to lose, is what really matters. But before I get into the really big takeaways from this book, I want to talk about one more tactical strategy, which is retirement accounts. This is another example where people are really prone to the nudges that exist, because your company probably offers a plan and they may have different defaults, and all of these serve as a different nudge to make a certain decision. But often those are not the right decision for your financial situation. So the chapter on retirement accounts is actually really geared towards companies, how a company should design their plan to benefit their employees the most. But there's a lot of lessons that you can take from this that I want to share. And the authors really talk about 3 different places where people need to be nudged into making the right decision. First is actually enrolling. People will usually take whatever the default option is. So if the default option is that you're automatically enrolled, then most people will do the right thing. They'll end up enrolled. Very few people will decide to opt out of that. And that is probably what is best for people. but they might not do it on their own if that wasn't the default. The second area that nudges are really important is how much you contribute. I've been on a lot of calls with people where they say that they only contribute to their 401k up to their employer match. The amount that an employer matches is a nudge. That's telling you what's a good amount to save. But different companies do completely different things. So in my last company, I could keep getting company contributions as long as I contributed up to 12% of my annual take-home pay. That is much higher than it is in most companies. So at my current company, I stopped getting any company match after I've contributed 4% of my take-home pay. So I can almost guarantee that there were a lot of people at my last company who were saving 12% of their income, and there's probably a lot of people at my current company who only save 4%, because those different nudges tell you a different amount of what's reasonable to save. Now, in both of those cases, I have chosen to save well above that, but I'm probably a bit of an exception. So what you think of as a normal amount of money to save and what a good amount of savings is really depends on, one, your employer, but then also the people around you, your parents, the people you know, your peers. All of these are data points and nudges that tell you what's good. And sometimes those are good nudges. I personally, for my friends, try to be a good nudge. I try to raise their bar of what they think of as possible, and I try to make sure that my friends take care of their finances. But a lot of people are probably not a very good nudge. Most people save very little. So you really do have to be careful about who your influences are and how you're being nudged, because your mindset and your beliefs about how much money you should be saving is influenced by those people. But that decision and what you do with your money, how much you put away, makes a massive difference on your life. So hopefully you're getting good nudges. And the last type of nudge they talk about in this book related to retirement accounts is what you actually invest in. For a long time, the default in almost all retirement accounts was to not be invested at all. That money would just go into a money market, which is basically just cash, and it wouldn't actually grow. Again, so many people just took the default that their money didn't actually go anywhere. This is very dangerous because people might think they're putting away enough money for retirement, but if they never change what that money is invested in, they may never really get a good return, and that money might actually lose value with respect to inflation rather than grow in their retirement account. In the last 30 years, a lot more companies have moved to a smarter default. They're usually something like a target date fund, which is a portfolio that automatically rebalances depending on the person's age. And while these vary a lot, they're on average probably a much better decision than just leaving your money in a money market fund. But the point is that this is something that you should take very seriously. What are the defaults? Do you even know what you're invested in? I've talked to a lot of people who really don't. And honestly, I remember once I went in to check my retirement account. I thought I was invested in one thing. I was actually invested in another. So it even got me. Being smart about what those defaults are and whether you accept those defaults can make a massive difference on how much money you have in 10, 20, 30 years. So take these seriously and don't let yourself be nudged in a direction that isn't right for you. So those were 4 very tactical topics that relate directly to how much money we spend and how much money we save. But again, there is a ton in this book that I did not get to. One, they go into way more detail on all the 4 topics I just talked about: credit cards, mortgages, insurance, retirement savings. But there's also a ton of other stuff in other chapters and other parts of the book that I haven't even discussed. They talk about methods for dealing with temptation, they talk about common biases which lead us to make mistakes, and they talk about strategies that you can use to stick with your savings goals. So again, if you would like a chance to win a copy of this book, click the top link in the video description, fill out the form, and the winner will be announced in a week from now. But if you take nothing else away from this video, I want to leave you with 2 really big, powerful themes that I picked up from this book, which I think are maybe the most important if you're trying to design your life to save more. And theme number 1 is the power of defaults. The default choice is a very powerful nudge, and in almost all cases, most people will use the default. This is something that companies will use against you, and it's something that you can use for yourself. So an example where you need to be wary of the default choice is there are many companies who are very happy to make the default option so that your subscription will resume once you've passed maybe a free trial. So even though you signed up just for a free trial, all of a sudden you actually get paid, even though you didn't take any action. That is a very powerful default for a company that can cost you a lot of money. But at the exact same time, you can establish your own defaults for how much money you save, how much money you invest, and what you do with your money so that you build wealth. So one of the most powerful defaults that you can set for yourself is how much money you automatically set aside every week or every month or every time you get paid, and put that in an investment account. I have it set up so that every single paycheck I get, a certain amount is taken away and put in my 401k so that I max out my 401k every year. I also have another automated investment that occurs every single week so that I take out even more money that I know I have extra, and I put that in an investment account. These automated mechanisms are my default way of living. What I mean by that is I have to take action not to save that money. I can if I want to. I can go in and say, don't take out the money this week. But it requires action on my part to not save. This is completely different from how most people live. They have to take action to save, but their spending happens very automatically. If you want to save more money, then this is what you have to reverse. Your default should be to save as much money as possible. And the thing that takes a little more work should be spending money. And this ties into the second really big theme out of this book, which is to make it easy. Us humans are relatively lazy and will almost always do whatever is the least resistance thing. So if you make something very easy, it dramatically increases the likelihood that it actually gets done. And there are so many studies where people have been polled about whether they're going to do something, and they may say yes, they mean to do that thing, but if it's not extremely easy and they don't know exactly how to do it, then they don't actually do it. But by making it easier, it dramatically increases how many people actually do that. So you can apply the exact same thing to saving money. It's not enough to want to save more money, to have the intention of saving more money. What you need to do is make it as easy as possible. Now, there is nothing easier than not having to do anything at all, which is why I just talked about automating things. Once it is automated, it's extremely easy because you don't even have to do anything. But there are a ton of other ways that you can make it easy to save money. You can also use this exact same logic to make it more difficult to do things that you should stop doing. If you feel like you're overspending right now, one of the most powerful things that you can possibly do is figure out how to make it a little harder to spend money. Making things difficult is also a nudge. It just tells you to not do the thing rather than a nudge to make you do something. It works both ways. So if you're trying to build behavior, make it as easy as possible to do it. Eventually it'll become a habit and it'll just happen on autopilot. But if you're trying to break a habit or change your behavior so that you no longer do something, make it more difficult. What extra steps can you add so that that doesn't happen as frequently or as easily, or it's just less fun? This is literally what I spent a lot of my time doing for clients, is trying to figure out how to make saving feel really easy and spending feel really hard. And I've seen this make crazy differences in how much people spend. But again, if you take nothing else away from this video, I hope it's these two themes. Defaults are really important, and you can set them for yourself. And second, if you want to do something, make it easy. If you want to stop doing something, make it really hard. But no matter what, something I really hope that you take away from this video is that you can design your own environment. Because corporations and the government will always create different nudges. They'll design our environment and our systems in a certain way. But those nudges will not necessarily be designed with your best intentions in mind. It's really you that has to take responsibility for your environment and how you design it so that you are influenced and nudged to take the right actions and do the right things. And once again, a very powerful way to do that is to surround yourself by like-minded people. So if you haven't already joined my free savings community, I hope you will consider it, because this is one of the most powerful ways to be nudged for good. But here's the thing, even the authors of this book will admit that sometimes a nudge isn't enough. Sometimes you need a little more to achieve your financial goals. And that's why you need to watch this video next, where I explain exactly what one of my subscribers needs to do to reach their financial goals. I think you'll learn a lot from their journey that you can apply to yours.